Tonight, the massacre at Virginia Tech. Out of nowhere, the deadliest shooting rampage in American history. Tonight, our coverage of what happened here and why.
It's so hard to describe. Just people shot, just blood pretty much everywhere. Just completely unreal.
What we know about the victims tonight and the man who police say pulled the trigger. Heavily armed and dangerous, and what might have set him off.
This is a special edition of NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams, reporting tonight from Blacksburg, Virginia.
And good evening from the campus of Virginia Tech. This is easily the saddest place in our nation tonight because this place will now be known forever as the scene of the largest mass shooting in U.S. history. This campus is located in the Blue Ridge Mountains, about 40 miles from Roanoke, Virginia. Virginia Tech is home to a student body of about 26,000. Tonight, the death toll here stands at 33, the result of a horror that unfolded here early this morning. There were apparently two separate shooting incidents 2 hours apart, the work of a man police identify as being of student age who then took his own life when the shooting was over. And so tonight there are 33 dead, at least 26 wounded in what is, again, the deadliest shooting rampage in our nation's history. This one single incident will no doubt affect every American student somehow, along with their families. President Bush earlier today at the White House said he was shocked and saddened by news of these shootings. It is now clear that years from now, Americans will remember where they were when they heard the news of what transpired here today. Tonight, we have extensive coverage of what happened here, and tonight's broadcast, by the way, will be presented with limited commercial interruption because of this event. We're going to begin our coverage with my colleague Kevin Cork, who was our first correspondent on the scene today and is with me tonight. Kevin, good evening.
Brian, all day long, people here in Blacksburg have been asking questions like, why did this happen and who would do such a thing? But also tonight, we're hearing quite often, how could this happen here in Blacksburg, a town where peace and quiet are usually taken for granted? Shortly after dawn, when many students were still sleeping, shots rang out inside the West Ambler Johnston dormitory on the sprawling Virginia Tech campus. Nearly 900 students live there. The attack comes without warning on the 4th floor. The gunman shooting and wounding multiple students, killing at least 2, a student and a resident advisor.
A boyfriend and girlfriend who were in a fight, and the RA came out to help, and the boyfriend shot the girl and the RA.
By 9 a.m., local news is reporting that 1 victim is dead, perhaps 8 or 9 wounded. Students huddled in their rooms, scouring the internet for any information as the police frantically hunt for the shooter on the 2,600-acre campus. 9:30 a.m., 2 hours after the first shots, on the opposite end of campus, classes are underway in Norris Hall, an engineering building. A gunman, police won't say if it's the same man, unleashes another shooting rampage. Eyewitness Trey Perkins was in German class when the gunman burst in.
He shot our teacher, and then we all got on the ground real quick, and he started just shooting around at different people. I'm not sure how long it lasted. It felt like a really long time. He didn't say get down. He didn't say anything. He just came in and started shooting.
Outside Norris Hall, graduate assistant Jamal Alberguti captured the sounds of gunfire on his cell phone camera.
Many people were dead, were killed, and we're really sad about that.
By the time police broke in, the gunman was dead. He had taken his own life. He still hasn't been identified. Noon, the horror of the second shooting spree begins to sink in, and the death toll keeps rising. As the day wore on, it became clear that almost 60 Virginia Tech students and faculty were dead or wounded. Students were questioning why they weren't warned during the 2 hours between the first and second shootings.
Resident advisors were going up and down the halls trying to notify everybody there as soon as we were aware. We also closed the building and had it surrounded by security people, so how they didn't know about that, I can't explain.
Indeed, many more questions to be answered. Tomorrow, the university will hold a gathering at 2 p.m. To begin the healing process. And I'm sure I speak for many when I say that process can't begin soon enough, Brian.
All right, Kevin Cork, who is just inside one of the buildings here on campus with our lead report for tonight. Trey Perkins and Derek Odell, two young men you just saw in Kevin's report, are both sophomores here at Virginia Tech. Derek, who was shot in the arm, along with Trey, is with us now. And Derek, we'll start with you. First of all, your wounds. How long have you been out of treatment, and what did doctors tell you? What happened?
The doctors actually treated me really quickly, considering the circumstances. I was shot in the arm, and the bullet went through, and I was in and out of the hospital in under 2 hours.
It said he used a larger caliber 9mm and a smaller .22. Was your wound caused by that smaller caliber .22, do you know?
I'm not really sure. They didn't tell us at the hospital.
Okay, well, let's begin with the story, and Derek, maybe we'll start with Trey, and tell us where you were when it started.
We were both sitting in German class. He actually sits right in front of me. It was about, I remember looking at my clock at, it was 9:35, and about 10 minutes later, we heard some gunshots across the hall. We really didn't know what it was at the time. After we heard that, a man just ran in. He shot our professor, and we all just got on the ground really quick, and he just continued to shoot. And I mean, I was just praying that, you know, I would be okay, and as many people around me would be okay as well. And I'm incredibly fortunate that I wasn't hit.
So you just dove under desks. Did you pile together at all, or were you all individuals?
It was a very small class, so there weren't a lot of people to get together. So we just I turned a couple desks over to try to get that between us and the shooter. He shot for probably a minute and a half, and after that he left. And I got up, I saw Derek, he had been hit in the arm, and another girl in our class as well. She was standing up, and we went over to the door, and the three of us were just trying to keep it shut, and he eventually tried to come back in. He was pushing on the door, trying to get back in, but we were holding it shut with our feet and our hands, and he shot through the door 4 or 5 times. Fortunately, none of us were hit when he was shooting through the door, and after that, he finally just went away, and I just started looking around, and I went over to another student who had been shot in the leg. I just took my sweatshirt off and kind of put it on his leg to try to stop the bleeding. Just tried to do whatever I could, and then the police arrived pretty shortly after that.
Wow. Derek, describe him for me. It's been said he was wearing a vest with a couple clips of ammo on it.
We saw him actually reload a clip while he was in our room. He had unloaded probably 8 or 10 shots into people in our class, very tragically. And he reloaded his clip, and nobody could really stop him because we were all hit or scared out of our minds.
Methodically, like in a movie, like you see people reload in the movies and on television.
Yeah, he looked to be trained in how fast he reloaded the gun.
How would you describe him physically?
He was a male Asian, about 6 feet tall, with a maroon hat and a leather jacket on.
Either of you guys recognize him from around campus?
Not at all.
So I know you don't have a heck of a lot of time to think beyond saving your own life. Do you remember having any thoughts while you're barricading yourself under a piece of furniture?
Actually, I thought of my mom and just what she, like, when she hears about it, what's going to go through her head, and if something were to happen to me, how she would deal with it, and that's really all I could think about.
How is it you think you guys have held it together to be able to even do this and stand here and talk to us tonight?
I think we're both still in shock. It's really a surreal moment to happen to both of us, and for us to both be here. I mean, it's amazing that we were saved.
Well, look, I know I join all of our viewers in saying we're sorry for the loss of your fellow students, and the whole nation reaches out to you. You've got a lot of support if and when you need it, and we're thankful you were able to describe this for us and our viewers tonight. You guys take care, okay? Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Our thanks to Derek and Trey, an emotional story that is still coming out in stories like theirs, and we have more now on the mystery behind all of this tragedy, on the gunman himself. We just learned more about him on live television and the weapons he used in today's shootings. Our justice correspondent, Pete Williams, has been working on this story today by interviewing sources he has in law enforcement. And Pete, we should also get to the question that is above all of this, and that is why? What set off this young man?
Right. Well, Brian, investigators say the young man who carried out the shootings today had planned this well in advance. He was armed with 2 guns and spare ammunition. The serial numbers on the guns had been filed off to make them harder to identify and trace. Investigators believe this may have all started over an argument he had with his girlfriend, and they also say after entering the classroom building, he chained the front doors shut. Federal investigators say he carried 2 handguns with him this morning, at least one of them a 9mm pistol like this one, capable of firing a round each time the trigger is pulled. Police say he also had spare ammunition magazines or clips, which he carried in a vest he was wearing so he could easily get to them. The federal assault weapons ban once limited to 10 the number of rounds a clip could hold, but that has expired, and 9mm guns can now hold up to 19 rounds before reloading. A 9mm pistol was the weapon used in what had been the worst mass shooting in America 16 years ago at a Texas cafeteria where 24 people were killed. Investigators say he carried a second weapon, a .22 caliber handgun. Officials say both are on their way to an ATF firearms lab for analysis. Though campus police say they cannot confirm that both shootings were the work of the same person, investigators believe that after firing shots at the dorm, the young man headed for the classroom building and appeared to have chained up the doors after he entered, sealing off a potential exit for students. As for who he was, whether he was an Asian American or a foreign student, investigators say they do have a preliminary identification, but it's been hard to arrive at. He carried no ID. His fingerprints did not match any existing record. And because he shot himself in the head, it's been difficult to match him up with a picture. Campus police continue to say tonight that they can't be certain that the shooting at the dorm and the classroom were, in fact, done by the same person. And they say they have what they call a person of interest, someone with some connection to the dorm shooting identified but not in custody. That person has not been charged, Brian.
All right, Pete Williams in our Washington bureau, where he will continue to work this story. Pete, thank you for that. Sarah Walker was one of the first responders on the scene here today. She is a volunteer EMT here in Blacksburg, Virginia. She has been kind enough to also join us tonight. Sarah, first of all, did you respond to the first shooting or word of the second 2 hours later, or both?
I did not respond to the first shooting. I, however, did respond to the second shooting.
What was the scene when you walked in? What room of all of this chaos did you respond to?
EMS, as a rule, does not actually respond into the scenes of active shootings like this one. We were staged nearby at a separate location, and what we initially received was what state police brought to us at our initial staging area, which were the walking wounded, the scrapes, the bruises, the grazes, and then they started bringing out the more serious injuries to us, and then we've started bringing ambulances to a different location for the more serious injuries that they again brought to us. We do not go into the buildings.
Here we are standing here on a windy hillside in beautiful country here on this campus. I am guessing that your training for an EMT here did not include mass bullet wound trauma like you had today.
Actually, just a year ago, we did practice for a massive casualty injury here in Blacksburg, where we brought in Tech Rescue. They were the actual runners of this incident today, but we had Tech Rescue and all the other providers that took part today were practicing for a situation just like this.
Now, one of the perverse aspects of today, you guys couldn't use choppers to get the wounded out. They all had to be transported on the ground because of this wind we're having, and that made it an even more cruel situation.
Yes, it did.
What kind of so you can assure us that when we list these wounds tonight in the hospital, anywhere from 26 to 28, based on the wounds you saw exiting here, some of these are what we could fairly call superficial and non-life threatening.
Yes, they very much are.
Okay, so we can hold out hope for many of the people who were able to make it out of today.
Absolutely.
Sarah, our thanks to you for making it after the day you've had, and thank you for joining us here on the air tonight. Sarah Walker, an EMT here in this beautiful country west of Roanoke, Virginia. We're going to take a break in our coverage here tonight. We'll be back with more on what unfolded here on the campus of Virginia Tech in just a moment. are back here on the campus of Virginia Tech tonight. President Bush spoke about the tragedy here earlier this afternoon, appearing on live national television from the White House. Our chief White House correspondent, David Gregory, is with us tonight for more on that. David, good evening.
Brian, White House officials were as shocked as the rest of the country when the magnitude of this massacre became clear around the lunch hour. The president was in a private lunch in the West Wing when an aide interrupted to say that the death toll had tragically shot up to more than 20 people at that point in the day, midday. The president immediately turned on the television in his private quarters and started to monitor the coverage, telling aides that he found it horrifying. As the afternoon wore on, they made preparations for some remarks. He spoke by phone to Virginia Tech's president as well as to the governor of Virginia before he spoke to the nation.
Schools should be places of safety and sanctuary and learning. When that sanctuary is violated, the impact is felt in every American classroom and every American community. Today, our nation grieves with those who have lost loved ones at Virginia Tech. We hold the victims in our hearts, we lift them up in our prayers, and we ask a loving God to comfort those who are suffering today.
And tonight at the White House, preparations underway for the president to travel down to Virginia Tech as early as tomorrow for that service. That's not confirmed, but possible. And just to show you, Brian, how national in character this tragedy is, the Senate Judiciary Committee late today canceled the appearance of the Attorney General Alberto Gonzales, who of course was supposed to testify on the firings of those U.S. attorneys. That'll happen later in the week now.
All right, David Gregory from the White House tonight as the rest of the nation looks at what happened here. We do have a quick update now on some of the other news of this day. Some of it comes from Iraq, and the news is bad. The U.S. military said 7 more Americans died, 3 soldiers and 2 Marines today, and 2 soldiers who were killed on Saturday in the latest accounting of the death toll from there. And the northeastern U.S. is still coping tonight with a massive spring storm that dropped record amounts of rain from North Carolina all the way up through New England, with New York and the New York metropolitan area taking the biggest hit. More than 8 inches of rain fell in the surrounding area in the city suburbs, causing some massive and unexpected flooding. A bit further upstate, it was snow with up to 17 inches on the ground in upstate New York, running on in through Vermont. High winds and heavy surf caused problems in coastal areas. Hundreds of thousands of people in all lost power. Another break. We'll be right back with more from Virginia Tech this Monday night in just a moment. The tragedy here at Virginia Tech today is, as we have said during this broadcast, the worst mass shooting in American history. We have the college president standing by to talk to us. The fact that it happened on a college campus puts it on a fairly substantial list of mass shootings at colleges and high schools, with, in many cases, students as both perpetrators and victims. A report tonight from NBC's Lisa Myers.
Until today, the deadliest campus shooting in U.S. history was a 90-minute homicidal rampage at the University of Texas. In 1966, an engineering student climbed the clock tower and opened fire, killing 16. In 1999, 8 years ago this week, 2 students at Columbine High School who felt they'd been bullied killed 13. In 2002, a graduate student dismissed from Virginia's Appalachian School of Law killed the dean and 2 others. Also that year, a failing student at the University of Arizona Nursing College killed 3 of his instructors.
He did have multiple handguns in his possession.
The shooters were different ages. Some had signs of mental illness, but experts say most had one thing in common: an inability to deal with their rage.
They determined that they were going to act out their frustrations at the tip of a gun instead of sitting down and working these things out with a counselor.
In recent years, most colleges have improved security, especially at dorms.
Classrooms generally have not been protected like dorms have, and of course the campus, most college campuses are wide open, so they also haven't been locked down at all.
Virginia Tech did have an emergency action plan, but it included only 4 pages on workplace violence, with the most obvious instructions: call 911, evacuate, and take cover. Experts say even with sophisticated security, it's tough to stop a lone individual out to die.
Whether one is a suicide bomber in Iraq or a suicide shooter on campus, if they've made up their mind and prepared to both kill and die, there's little we can do except perhaps kill them before they're able to act out.
And while there will be efforts to identify these individuals before they erupt in gunfire, experts agree tonight this day will happen again. Lisa Myers, NBC News, Washington.
On obviously the worst day in the history of Virginia Tech, Dr. Charles Steger, the president of Virginia Tech, has taken time to join us on the air tonight. First of all, the condolences of all of us, all those watching tonight on this shock to your college community. Do we know anything more about what may be a motive in this?
We don't at this time. We have witnesses being interviewed. The bodies are still being identified, and some parental notification has already taken place. But at this point in time, we do not know what the motive of the shooter was.
Dr. Steger, as it is already being raised as a question, are you convinced, and it's early yet and the shock is still settling in, that everything correct was done in that 2-hour interim between shooting incidents?
Well, based on the information we had from our security people, as soon as we were aware of the first shooting incident in the dorm, that facility was completely locked down. It appeared to be an event contained and perhaps involving only those 2 individuals. The second shooting was totally unanticipated. And as soon as we found out about that, significant security was dispatched to the building. The sweep was beginning, and then we initiated the lockdown. The issue is, did we lock them up in the academic buildings or in the dorms? Only 9,000 people live on campus. About 14,000 were in transit, not counting our 10,000 employees. So this is like shutting down a city. You can't do it instantaneously.
And did you think you had the gunman after the first shooting incident?
Well, we had a suspect, and we were pursuing that. But we weren't certain at that point in time. First, we weren't sure there was a third person involved, and then as we looked through the room, we didn't find a murder weapon. And then we were also interviewing witnesses, trying to put together the puzzle of what actually happened.
You understand parents are watching around the country, and they want to know that college-age children, when in college, are safe.
Right. Well, I can assure them that we are doing everything that we possibly can. We have significant additional security on the campus this evening. We will do a review of this event as we do all such events to see how we can improve in the future. But it is a difficult process. Our hearts go out to the families, but we will heal and we will go forward.
And you've spoken to the president, and he may visit as early as tomorrow.
Right. I spoke to President Bush just a few hours ago.
All right. Dr. Steger, thank you. After the day you've had, and again, the nation is watching and the nation is mourning along with you. Thank you very much. We want to remind our viewers that NBC News will offer extensive coverage of this story, including an NBC News special report tonight, an hour-long look at what transpired here today. That's at 10 o'clock Eastern Time, 9 Central Time. And a reminder, tomorrow, the Today program will originate from here, the campus of Virginia Tech. Coverage continues all evening long on MSNBC and on your late local news. For now, from the campus of Virginia Tech, I'm Brian Williams, NBC News. That is our broadcast for tonight. Good night.
Everywhere you go, there we are. America's news leader.